Tonight we're honored to have two linguistic scientists with their presentation tonight about the Wampanoag Language Reclamation Project. Jessie Gaird and Tracy Kelley. They're both members of the Mashpee Wampanoags and have lived on the Cape all their lives. So I'm going to introduce Jessie first. She first became interested in the language of her ancestors in the early 1990s. That was about 140 years after the last native speaker had passed away. So language pretty much died out in the meantime. So as part of her research, one day she attended a presentation by Professor Kenneth Hale. He is a renowned MIT linguist and a leading expert in the world on indigenous languages. And during that presentation, she got up and engaged him, and they had some discussion and arguments about the Wampanoag language. A short time after that, she was surprised to get a letter informing her that MIT had created a grant so that she could come and study whatever she wanted at MIT for a year. Jessie, it was a lot harder for us to get into MIT.
Well, I still had to apply after that.
So naturally what she did is she continued her studies with the Wampanoag language. And her work so impressed the linguistic staff at MIT in general, and it also impressed Noam Chomsky in particular, that they admitted her to go, and a few years later she had earned her master's degree in linguistic sciences. So Jessie's work brought a dead language back to life, and as far as we know, she is the only person in the world who's ever done anything like that. So it's an amazing feat. She then helped her tribe establish a school which has now trained over 600 members to different levels of speaking a language, from beginner up to expert. And she's also a co-founder of the Wampanoag Language Reclamation Program and currently serves as its Director of Linguistics. So for all of these and other leadership accomplishments, Jessie has been recognized with several distinguished honors, including a MacArthur Genius Fellowship in 2010, and she was one of 100 Women of the Century in USA Today. So, presenting with Jessie tonight is Tracy Kelley, a young woman who is already recognized as a leader of both the Mashpee Wampanoag tribe and in the town of Mashpee. Tracy received her master's in linguistics from MIT in 2020, and currently serves as the Executive Director of the Wampanoag Language Reclamation Program. And also, a few weeks ago, Tracy was elected by the citizens of Mashpee onto a term for their select board. So she's become a leader within the community as well. So without further ado, I welcome Jessie and Tracy to come up.
Thank you, Bill. Katabatash George. We're Mashpee Wampanoag women, so we don't need the microphone. I just the Tasuis Jessie Kwanik Wais, New Tomas Masipia, Ninka Kutumok Yain and Wachi Wampanon Tuang, Kawonk Yuah Naton. Kasi?
Natasuis Tracy Kelley Wanash, New Tomas Masipiat, Ka Natai Masipiat Wong. Kanipiamo.
Oh yeah, I said my name's Jessie Littledoe. I'm from Mashpee. I'm a teacher of Wampanoag language, and I said, and this is also my daughter. I'm really proud of. Okay, so we don't want Wix right now.
Not yet.
Not
Don't
yet.
X out of it.
Okay, so so what we're gonna do, folks, is I'm just got a slideshow prepared here, PowerPoint, to talk about the language project and some of the things we've done, some of the things we're going to do, and how we accomplish our work, and why that's important. And Tracy is going to present her her thesis that she created that helps to support language. And instead of me going through the whole thing and then saying, is there anybody that has a question? If you have a burning question while we're talking, just raise your hand and we would be happy to answer your question. And my whole goal tonight is that you don't fall asleep in your dessert. Get there, we're good. And figure out what I've got going here on the screen. I can't even see with my glasses on at that. Play from start. Okay. Now this looks weird. Oh, it looks fine there though. Okay. Okay, so Wampanoag Tuaong literally means Wampanoag language. So in 1993, I had a vision that lasted several nights. And a vision's a little bit different from a dream. And I was working in social services for Community Action Committee, and I worked with battered women and homeless families. And I really loved my work, but I had this vision. And the vision basically was my folks talking to me, although I didn't know what they were saying, and I didn't recognize the language. I didn't really know what I was hearing. And the vision lasted for 3 nights. So it picked up where it left off the day before. And I just thought it was just curious. And I just sort of set it aside. But one day I happened to be driving down MacArthur's Boulevard toward Woods Hole. And there's a sign there for Sippawisset. And for some reason, when I read the sign Sippawisset, a light went on. And I said, oh, I wonder if what I've been hearing and what I heard in my vision was my people's language. And in that moment, for some reason, in that one moment, it was like a hand reached inside me and lit a fire inside of me. And I was driven to know about language. And long story short, I reached out to an elder in a sister tribe, the Wampanoag tribe on the island, and asked her, hey, you ever thought about anything about our traditional language? And she said, it's funny. I had a vision about it some months ago, and I've been thinking about it. And I said, I did too? And I think that's what it was. And she said, why don't we get a meeting? Why don't we send out an invite and tell everyone we're going to make food? That makes everybody come out to a meeting. If there's no food, no one's coming. We'll make food and we'll invite people, and we'll start to talk about language. And so that was in 1993. I started doing independent research. And as George said, I ended up needing to leave the work that I was doing. I really loved the work. And I quickly learned that in order to do this work, we needed to have someone that understood Algonquian languages, and we needed training. And so we thought we should be the ones to do the training, and we should be the ones to reclaim our language, because that's our responsibility to work with our language as a community member. But the question is typically like, why do we do this? One of the reasons we do this is to hear what our grandparents had to say. Not a lot of people can hear what their grandparents said 400 years ago. But Wampanoag was the first American Indian language where people decided to use an alphabetic writing system to record things. So we have all sorts of documents that are 400 years old. Some of them are from our own community in Mashpee, and all over Wampanoag territory. So we get to hear what our folks had to say about any number of things. And then we get to learn how our folks viewed the physical world, and we learn about philosophy, we learn about traditional histories, we learn about religion, kinship systems, the traditional governmental system here. So much is brought into focus. And there are things like burial ceremonies. So there are certain things that the community does certain times of the year. And if someone passes away, we have a burial ceremony. And when you grow up in a culture, you do things day in and day out, year in and year out. And you don't really think about why you do them or what's happening. It's just what you do as part of your culture. One of the things language has done is brought an understanding through the words for things about why we do certain things. Like, why do we put a pine bough and a tuft into the grave? Why is someone buried on a cedar bed? I never thought about these things until I started reading Wampanoag documents and understand this is why we do things this way. So language also brings a really clear lens to culture. So those are some of the reasons we do this. And as George said too, we didn't have any speakers. For like 140 some years, we had no speakers of Wampanoag. We just had this huge, rich collection of native written documents. And here's what some of them typically look like. So learning to read them is a huge pain in the ass originally. And then if you think you can read what people's script was telling you, then you had to go and read what other scientists in the field of linguistics had written about the language. And that writing, if there are other linguists in here can tell you, like there's this competition in the field of Algonquian linguistics. Who can write the most opaque document? That person gets the respect. And some of you know what I'm talking about. So there's a lot of work that goes into it, but there's a whole bundle of resources for Tracy and I to work with. There are wills, deeds, petitions, lots of petitions to the government about people's rights, and a lot of land disputes, hunting and fishing disputes, lots of religious documents. The first Bible put to press on this continent was printed in Wampanoag. So in 1663, it was printed at the Indian School, which is now called Harvard University. So that was it. There was an Indian school there at Harvard to educate Wampanoag youth, and there was a printing press there, and a group of Wampanoag speakers, supervised by a minister by the name of John Eliot, translated the entire Bible into Wampanoag. What a fascinating document, because it's not transliteral. So people were translating from their idea of, oh no, he didn't mean that. He meant this. When he said this in English, this is what he meant. So that's very instructive as well. So we have that to work with, which is that document alone has about 60,000 items in it. And there's dictionary work. We can talk about that in a few minutes. And we've made phrase books, workbooks, textbooks, prayer books, coloring books, storybooks. So one of the first things I did when I was a grad student was standardize the orthographic system, because in the 1600s, 1700s, right up through most of the 1800s, if you wanted to spell something and you were an English speaker or a Wampanoag speaker, there was one rule to spelling, and that rule was spell it any old damn way you want. So there was no like Oxford English dictionary. It didn't even exist. There was, and Wampanoag people all had their own spelling systems too, and they were all over the place. So I standardized the spelling system so we wouldn't have those problems in the future, and use that for the dictionary. Another thing that we needed to do was get more scientists on the job, more heads on the job. So two other, the year after I left MIT, MIT finally broke down and formed the MIT ILI, Indigenous Language Institute. And that allows young folks in cohorts to come through and learn about their language family and get a degree in linguistics. Somebody has a question back here. I'm sorry, I didn't have my glasses on. But oh no, so yes, yeah. So they're taking English letters for the most part. There's one character that looks like the number 8, but it's really the sound ooh. So people were writing two O's for ooh, and then they started making this infinity symbol. And by the time they got to putting things on a printing press, somebody said, "Oh, there's ooh right here! Look, look, look!" But it was the number 8. So they just switched it that way and kept that for the sound ooh. Yeah. So they were taken from English missionaries saying, "Hey, try this for this sound and try this for that sound," and but it's not predictable because for example, one writer used the letter I, but the letter I represented schwa, which is the sound but only a schwa that causes infection on the following consonant, and the infection is nya. So it's like, yeah, and then he broke that rule all the time too. So, yeah. No, there's nothing like that. What we do have is one language and a family of over 40 languages. And some of these languages have multiple dialects in them. And a lot of the languages are still spoken today. So because there's an Algonquian family, not Algonquin, it gets a little confusing. There's a language in there called Algonquin, but that's up around Ottawa in Canada. But the Algonquian family is a really large geographic distribution of languages that are all sisters. So just like Italian, Portuguese, Spanish, French, just like these languages are all sisters, there are very, very regular corresponding sound changes that take place across those languages. So if I'm not quite sure what a particular consonant or vowel is intended, I can either go back to Proto-Algonquian, which is the mother language, or I can go back to Passamaquoddy in Maine, that's still spoken. And I can make the corresponding sound changes and know predictably what that writer intended by the letter I or the letter E. Yeah, good question. So those some of the things that we work with, and Tracy got credentialed, and one other person, Natana Hicks Greendale, got credentialed, so we have more help. So one of the critical things that we've done is, I don't know, Tracy, and you can jump in here anywhere you want too. One of the critical things that we've done here is we run what's called a Master Apprentice program. And what Master Apprentice means is you have a group of folks that come in each day and they learn to speak. That's their job. You spend about 25 hours a week without using English. And so they learn to become speakers, they learn the grammar, they learn to make curriculum, and they teach. And so that's how things spread out. And they come in really without much under their belt. It's really quiet when they're new. There's a lot of tears some days. And I do tell apprentices, Tracy will tell you when they come in, I tell them, if you're not crying within the first 2 months, you're probably not going to work out in this job. It's really hard.
I made sure to cry.
She made sure to cry. Yeah. So,
the experience of having essential basic needs, there's like you feel somewhat infantile. And so it's really hard to produce speech. And the interesting thing was I took every grammar book class I could take. I was involved with a language project since the 90s, but that was the first time being fully immersed in the language. So the production of speech, the anticipation, the expectation is quicker, dialogue based. You're not working through a book or recordings. It's in real life to produce speech and dialogue. And so that was a challenge when you're saying, gosh, can we take a break? I need to go to the bathroom, but you don't know how to say that. in the middle of a conversation. So that was some of the tears, the growing pains with language.
Yeah. So it's sort of teaching people to acquire language the way humans naturally acquire language. Obviously, we're using all parts of our brain because once we reach around the age 6, the language acquisition center that you're born with kind of stops working. So there's a part in your brain that it just comes with the package. We don't have to teach our eyes how to work. They just do their job. And your language acquisition center burns neural pathways so you can learn language. But the body figures right around between ages 6 and 7, you've pretty much got the grammar. You might not have all the vocab you're going to have, but you pretty much have the grammar, and it kind of relaxes. So after that age, if you want to acquire a second language, you're using lots of different parts of your brain. It's a lot more work. Totally doable, but more work.
But it was really fun. A lot of the activities were based on daily routine and daily living. So total physical response, a methodology, acting out, going to the doctor, or actually going to the grocery store together as a group, or going out fishing for the day. And no English
Or making
allowed,
the team
so
come to my house and clean.
Yes, we had
Talk about cleaning.
We had cleaning days. And so within 18 months, I started off as a novice speaker on the ACTFL scale. And within 18 months, I was an advanced low speaker, which was immense for my journey that I spent so many years, putting into. It's just that 18 months to go that far up the scale was just phenomenal. But it's out of the sense of necessity and a pragmatic approach, right? You're in real life situations where you need to produce the speech.
Yep. And and you start speakers with things like this. Nipawikwa. Nipawikwa. Nipaush. 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 Nipaush.
Okay.
Wanikan. Wanikan. Matapch. Nipaush. Wanikan. Matapch. Nipawikwa. Wanikan. Matapikwa. So this is TPR, and this is how we start. Or you say, Tracy, pionch. Aquish. Pionch. Aquish. Umpamaquaish. Wanikan, Tracy! And you start people with like, Natasuish Jessie. Natasuish Jessie. Natasuish Jessie.
Natasui's Tracy.
Ah.
Natasui's Tracy.
Uh-huh.
Natasui's Tracy.
Natasuish Jessie. Katasuish Tracy.
Natasui's Tracy. Katasui's Jessie.
Wanikan. And then you move on to Natasui's Jessie. Katasui's.
Natasui's Tracy.
Oh, Wanikan. So this is what sort of master apprentice looks like. And we play lots of games.
Scaffolding.
And we do scaffolding. So we're slowly building on top of that to move people up what's called the ACTFL scale. So there's a scale with 13 levels on it that starts from novice to distinguished speakers, and it's used to measure language proficiency for languages throughout the world. It's a standardized scale. And so we try to teach to that scale. So we've been able to make lots of speakers this way, but it's never enough. And one of the challenges we have all the time is funding. There's constantly a funding issue because you're asking people to immerse themselves in their culture and in the language. They all have children. Usually they have children, and you want people on your team with children because we want to pass it on to kids. So they have to pay the rent, and they have to pay the mortgage, and they have to buy groceries. And you want them to teach. And you want to be able to say, hey, I need you here at this time, and I need you for this many hours. So funding is a constant issue. We have been able to secure some large federal grants, but those grants are we've been told basically now, forget it. Your applications this year, forget it. Some of the projects that were funded, they're told you're not going to get the rest of your money. So it's tough, but it's always been tough. Like, for example, the Administration for Native Americans falls under the Department of Health and Human Services, and they make funding each year for language projects. They make 13 awards a year, roughly, but they get 400 applications from tribes. So funding's always an issue, and we're always looking for help for funding. So if you're interested at all in that, there are some folders on the back table that tell you about the project and ways that you can help. So that's my job. I'm just a linguist, but that's my job to ask for help too. One of the things we did too is people that had babies when we started this project, I intentionally hired apprentices that had babies or were pregnant and encouraged them to bring the kids to work with them so that the kids are exposed early, so we get more bang for our buck. I thought I put a photo in here. I didn't know I put one of the class recordings in here. That's role playing. So we play going to the doctors, we play we're on vacation. When we go out to lunch together, people would have to order their lunch in Wampanoag and make sure that the wait staff knew what they were asking for, even though it was a struggle. That was always interesting. And now we have family immersion camps. So families come for the whole weekend. Our next one is in July. And once they step into camp, there's no English at all. You can only use Wampanoag or be silent. And you rotate through immersion sets in classes throughout the weekend. And typically you get a string of beads. And if someone catches you using English, they can say, buy me, which means give me your money. And you have to give up a bead. And at the end of camp, we have a really nice auction. And so all of the numbers and dollar amounts are up on the wall in Wampanoag. You have to bid in Wampanoag. And you take your beads and you win some really cool prizes. It's usually the kids. They wait, like they wait, like they hide. And if they hear like one adult using one English, they're like, buy me. And so the kids kill it at that auction. We do have community language classes. We have a growing library of Wampanoag books and a dictionary that's been in progress for like 30 years. I thought, I have a whole year of a research fellowship. I'm going to make a dictionary. Yeah. So we have 13,000 items in our dictionary right now, and we're going to have an electronic version, hopefully ready for the community by Christmas this year. Yeah. Yeah, very good question. Usually we don't do anything about it. And intentionally, just to see what speakers are going to do. So there's a lot of code switching and borrowing, just like English does. So like, there's this like beautiful pastry that I can get in the morning on the corner where I live, and it's really crispy outside, and it's kind of shaped like this, and it tastes really buttery, and it really goes good with my coffee. And it's called a croissant. But now that's not English. But it's a perfectly good word. Why not? Could I have a croissant, please? So we don't, I try not to, George, only because I'd like to see the language naturally move to where it's going to move. Although when people are talking, I've heard things like, na textak, he texted me. And so they're using that as a verb, and they're putting the proper morphology around that, and they're using it syntax around that. And so we don't do anything about it. The only people that ever change language, human language, are children. They're the only ones that ever do it. And that's why you often hear adults saying, don't say that, that's not a word. But, well, if the kids are using it, if that's how they're using it, it's now a word. And that's going to change. That's why we don't sound like our grandparents did. If you think about how your grandparents spoke, it's very different than you speak. and they thought we were just all really poor English speakers, but language just changes. And it's always the kids that do it. So we don't do anything. We say, na computer for my computer. Na text duck for he texted me. Na text Tracy, I texted Tracy. We just, yeah, don't. We usually don't do that. Yeah.
How do you actually pronounce writing of Wampanoag?
Wampanoag, this one?
Yeah.
Wampanoag. So the W is nothing sexy, it's just wa, what you might expect. The O with the circumflex is on, low back vowel, on. Womp, womp, womp. And you see Wampanoag a lot of times written W-A-M-P, but it's really a vowel with a P, and so people are spelling it with an M. Womp, ana, ana. There's two A's. There's short A, long A. The only difference, English doesn't really distinguish them, but the only difference is length. So one's one's ah. It's like car and father, car and father. There's a difference in the length of that A. This language recognizes that. So Wampanoag, ont, T is T. And there's remember our ooh that somebody's like, oh, they have ooh. It's the letter 8. And one of the things I tried to do is keep the orthographic system as close to the original documents as possible. So when people want to appeal to those, they can kind of muddle, get through that if they can read this system. Wampanoag, there's that low back vowel again, K. Wampanoag. And this is Wampan na, like be this way, which is Wampana, which literally means like original, be original, something, right? So Wampanaak, Wampana, be original, ak is plural. So the first part of that is an AI, animate intransitive verb, Wampanaak. So Wampanaak means original people. It's the same word with sound change as Wabanaki, which is up in Maine. Also the same as Abenaki, where they drop their W and they keep this E at the end with sound change. This ua part means go like this. So it's like things that have speech. And then the onk at the end means I'm a noun. That's all it means. So the original people, this thing. So Wampanoag language. Yeah.
How many characters are in the alphabet? Have you determined that?
13. Yeah, there's a lot we don't have. So there's an original sound in what's called Proto-Algonquian. So thousands of years ago, there was one community and one language, and people slowly spread out for various reasons, and you end up with these 40 different languages and different dialects. But there's this sound, the original theta sound, that has its reflex in 4 sounds, either R, L, R, La, Ya, or Na. And Wampanoag is an N language. So we don't have R anywhere, and we don't have L anywhere. And wherever we used to have the theta, we will have N, where in L language, wherever they had theta, they will now have L. Like
She had a whiteboard.
Yeah, we don't have a whiteboard. That would be better, but so and we didn't have anything that you could use every day for speakers or families or kids. So everything we make has to be from scratch. So we have to build our whole library, which we've been busy doing. Tracy, you want to talk a little bit about Canusi?
Sure, I think I have a couple minutes just to mention really quick. I have been really passionate about language my entire life. I found out we had a language when I was very little, and I thought it was very secret. It was fun. It was exciting. It was a huge part of my identity. And so naturally, I went to all the groups that I could. I went to these grammar workbook classes. I was like 12, 13 years old in these classes it was intergenerational, really, but mostly older folks, adults. And I then went off to college. So I went off to get my undergrad. I went all the way out to Western Mass, to UMass Amherst, and I couldn't go to class. anymore. So classes were really centralized where we are tribally. So they were in person, and there were immersion camps if you could go. Those were, definitely in person. And there were also language, grammar classes that you could go to, whether they were in Mashpee or Woods Hole or Martha's Vineyard. So that created a barrier of accessibility. And ever since then, I was really the idea to digitize and kind of what would be the next like cool thing we could do with language just stuck with me and never left. Although it did not go over so well. So tribal communities have experienced a lot of exploitation, language loss. There's very sad history behind that. And so naturally the communities were feeling very protective over the language. And they're like, I don't know about digitizing, putting all these things online, who could access it? Shouldn't we give our own folks the chance to learn or reclaim our language first? And so for quite some time, I was unable to see that dream through. However, my green light was COVID. COVID happened. And what a thing. People said, aha, people really do need to connect. There are tools that we can support that if you want to develop them, we will approve you developing these as long as they're password protected and they're for tribal households and community members. So because of the pandemic, I was able to move forward through our language committee and our board permission to launch Canusi, which is our first online learning platform. I was really passionate about the physical accessibility to actually access your birthright, your indigenous language. But I was also passionate about the different learning styles. So over the course of years of teaching for a very long time, I noticed that, some folks would avoid certain types of classes or might have been like a literacy barrier. They weren't comfortable reading aloud in front of others. Maybe they had challenges reading in general. And so we could really support more different styles of learning through audio, through visual supports, reading while you're hearing. So I got really passionate about learning methods, different learning styles and needs, and accessibility of those things. That's when I launched Canusi as part of my graduate thesis from MIT. And I graduated in 2020, surprisingly, during the pandemic. Oh, what a crazy time. And so that's one of our key resources and one of my favorite anecdotes. I launched a class, so an remote immersion class for the first time during the pandemic, and it was fascinating. So two of the students were Wampanoag tribal members. They lived in Virginia a half hour from each other and had no idea. So they're from the same tribe. They both signed up for the class, and that's where they met. And then we also had a student log in from Finland. Mm-hmm. So you get to see the analytics in the back end. So it's been fascinating just to see where people are accessing this tool. And I do have an example. I don't know if we have time to play a little clip.
Sure. You guys want to hear a little clip of what she made? Okay.
Like one of the audiobooks.
Yeah, go for it.
Minimize it, I guess.
Yeah, go ahead.
Which one?
So one of the things the team does is make support materials and recordings, and we give them to Tracy, and she uploads them here on this platform for families to learn from. And most of the folks that access her site have had some sort of learning. They're not just stepping in here cold.
So, what about Wampanoag music or song?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's lots of new songs in the language.
Is the scale the same, or?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, I've made songs, but I wouldn't know a scale if it hit me in the head. I know it sounds good, and how I can match syllables to a melody. So there's lots of.
Melodies are like melodies that we would know, like.
No, some of the melodies are created, by people in the community. lots of the melodies are created by people in the community. But there's also stuff that's very familiar that people are just putting words to, Wampanoag words. Like, there's one that goes with Fleta Jaka, I think.
So it has the reading through the letters and then the visuals of the pictures. So we had developed a library of books, and then we worked to make audiobooks out of the library that we were building. There was a major gap of younger folks that were learning the language, and their parents weren't speakers. So it's not like they could necessarily like sit down and just read a book with their kiddo. But this was certainly a tool that allowed them to have that type of connection and do that together. So that's just like a little example.
Yeah. What do you want to pull up?
Your slideshow.
Oh, I don't know what's left on there. Let's see. I think just update what? No, yep. So I don't know if you guys are going to be able to hear this or not. I don't know if I can get this. I didn't do that. It just fell out. It just fell out.
That microphone.
The microphone is
done. There's not even a light anymore.
The whole
your
whole case is cracked.
Oh
yeah, it's that's why it won't work, because you can't tighten that, by the way. So one of the things I did is a few summers ago, I still have to get trained all the time. I went to the American Indian Language Development Institute in Arizona. And one of the things they made us all learn how to do is use TikTok. So we all had to learn how to use TikTok and make some recordings. So here's some of my grandchildren on TikTok. So this is some videos of kids introducing themselves and things. So those are some of the resources we're making, but that's the end of our PowerPoint, and that's about Wampanoag Language Reclamation Project. Yep. So I know of one other project that started after we did. I mean, one of the really cool things about this work is this Wampanoag Language Reclamation Project has been a beacon of light for languages around the globe. I mean, they're seeing that we've been able to reclaim language and have the community engaging in the language when there were no speakers at all. And a lot of them say, we've only got 5 speakers left. We've only got 10 speakers left. Like, we're in deep trouble. And one of the things that we do is we go out to communities when we can, I mean, because we're so busy here, and we help other communities develop programs to reclaim and get things going more in those communities. Just because we had to start with absolutely nothing. So everybody's situation always looks better than ours, and we're like, yeah, we can tell you what to do about that.
But something really cool also is the reverse. So in my cohort, I worked with a Wolastoqiyik and Passamaquoddy native speaker, and we have a polysynthetic language, and oftentimes they drop vowels all the time, and he didn't know the history of the different morphemes that came together to make a certain term. So I would have that screenshot basically from 200-300 years ago and say, I know that initial morpheme. It's actually wash.
Yeah, we see what you dropped, because we have a snapshot from 400 years ago, and they're using language today. So if they want to know what the rest of that morpheme was before language change happened and they dropped it, Wampanoag likely will have it. So we're starting from a very conservative place. So as an English speaker, it's like you learning English today, but learning the English from English speakers in the 1600s. So that's the spot we're in.
You say something about tenses, the use of tenses in the language, compared to, say, English or a European language?
Very different. So there are transitive verbs, intransitive verbs. Then there are things called conjunct verbs, subordinative verbs, participles. But transitive verb, for example, transitive means you can do it to something. And then there are verbs that are transitive animate. You can do it to an animate, which is not always a person. It's a tricky term. Or a transitive inanimate. You can do it to an inanimate, and it won't be the same. So, like, if I say now is a transitive verb. Na now, Tracy. I see Tracy. But nanam, apen. I see a table. So they're different verbs. They have to agree with the gender of the noun, and the entire world is separated into two genders, which are animate and inanimate nouns. And that entire world, like what drives an animate noun, is incredibly fascinating. So if a noun meets any one of 6 conditions, it's considered animate. The rest of the world's inanimate. And so you need to know your noun's gender in order to talk about it. But then you could take a transitive animate verb stem, like now. If you added every person, tense, mode, number, and preverb, you could potentially inflect one transitive animate verb 3,402 ways. Yeah, and so it's a very, very, very productive language. You just start with one stem, and the entire sentence is packed into one word.
So I just had a quick, because you used the word gender, but then you described animate and inanimate. Mm-hmm. I'm assuming you used the word gender because
really, so the real meaning of the word gender just means set or type. Set or type. That's all it means. We hear it a lot related to males and females and people that are transgender. We're talking about humans, but the term gender just means a group. So many languages have groups or sets, and linguists still call that gender. So we have 2 types. We have what's called animate and what's called inanimate.
We don't have masculine.
No,
feminine,
we don't. We don't. In fact, to say him or her is just one word. There's no sex involved. It's just nakum, which means him or her. It doesn't matter if that's a man or a woman. It's just nakum.
So then I would wonder, since you studied some of the history and philosophy and a lot of how this happened, how does that inform how the philosophy of the language, of how you see the world, because it's not divided in male or female gender, it's divided animate or inanimate. How does that change the philosophy of seeing the world?
It changes everything. It changes everything. It changes everything for me. I mean, even kinship terms. So this would be a very difficult language to teach in an institutionalized setting like a public school or via English medium because, for example, terms of kinship like mother, you can't say mother. You can't say she's a mother. You cannot say that. You can say Tracy Nukas. Tracy's my mother. Tracy Kukas, Tracy Ukasa, Tracy Nukasan, Tracy Kukasan, Tracy Kukasu, Tracy Ukasuwa. So Tracy's my mother, your mother, our mother, their mother, you guys' mother. But you cannot say mother. Every single person, every single kinship term in the language belongs to someone else in that community. So you cannot express mother because, and that makes perfect sense. You cannot be a mother unless there's somebody else involved in this conversation. So if we were to try to teach language in a public school setting where they have to meet core educational Common Core standards, the kids would, what form of mother would you teach them? Like, so that's been a problem for some language projects across the country and on reservations and off. That gets to be a little bit of a problem, but I mean, there's a whole class of nouns that take the sound at the end when you say mine, but they only ever take the sound if there are certain nouns, and those certain nouns mean that noun is me and I am that noun. And land is one of those. So if I say ahki, that's just land. Ahkiash means lands. If I say my land, it's natakim. So the nut is mine, but the M at the end means, oh, that is me, and I am that. So there's an inalienable relationship there. The same inalienable relationship with Manat, which is creator of all. So if I just say creator of all, Manat, if I say my creator, the Manatum. So in our teaching, the creator is us, and we are the creator. And we have an inalienable relationship that starts with Namanatum and ends with Natakim, my land. Anything that's inserted in there that says that you say mine about, that has to take an M. Anything that touches either. So water is Nanapim. So the water's in between creator and the earth. So we see everything as earth. Some of it has water over it and some of it doesn't, but it's all earth. So the bottom of the ocean is seen as earth. So when the water tries to insert itself between my creator, me, and the land, it has to take the M2. It gets incorporated into the relationship. So does the word for enemy. So you got to be very careful. If you're going to call someone your enemy, you've got to be careful, because what you're saying is, I am taking that person unto myself. Person, so to speak, is going to rent space in my head. So yeah.
Philosophically, if you think about it, this is what's fascinating to me. I'm into all that philosophy. Yeah. I've always seen the planet as one big blue marble that we all share. So I'm going to do some more studying on the philosophy that this language is driving, this whole thing of we are all one.
And nobody else in the entire language family has inalienable M's on the end of their nouns. None of the other 40 languages have it, but I will bet you they did. So language has been, with language change, I will bet you they did. Yeah. Welcome. Okay.
Well, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much. And final step.